Hello everybody, Andy here from Glass Half Dead, the #1 kill team channel on the internet, unless of course you are aware of any other kill team channels and care about objective facts. Anyway, this is the big line of sight video. In this video, I'm going to give you a very simple and easy to follow definition and example of line of sight. We're then going to go through a training exercise with our models, putting them in certain situations to see if you can guess if our targets are valid or not, and then I'll explain why or why not to make sure every possible angle, scenario, situation is covered. The whole line of sight system is easy once you understand it, but is perhaps a little crunchier than you expect, but the reason for this is that it is a system that defines Kill Team as a shooting based game. If we didn't have this interaction of different terrain types with the order system, it would be a melee game. So yes, this is a very important system to the core identity of Kill Team. I'm going to say a lot of words to describe a very simple interaction. This video is too much. This video should not be used as a basic tutorial for Kill Team. If you see someone asking for a how to play Kill Team video, don't link them this video. Only link them this video if they specifically ask for line of sight help. This video will come across as far too intimidating and give the wrong impression of the core rules. This video is extreme overkill for a basic concept for those that have already played the game a few times and are still struggling. If you understand line of sight, visibility, valid target, drawing targeting lines, retaining cover saves and obscuring, then do not let this video confuse you. And honestly, if you're enjoying the game, don't let rules get in the way of that. Play how you think is fun. Who cares how the rules actually work? The app included light rules don't even have half of these rules. The Space Marine 2 Kill Team scenario fundamentally changes how the core rules work. It's all made up. Play how you think is fun to play. But for those who want to know and are having some strugs, it's all about finding a valid target. This is mainly to answer can we shoot or not, but it will come up for certain other rules too, and I'll give an example right at the end of the training montage we're about to do. But keep in mind that finding a valid target is not tied in any way to actually performing the shoot action. Let's start with the absolute basics. For those that don't know anything, obviously go and check out my how to play video for the actual legitimate best how to play Kill Team video on the internet, linked in the top comment below. Do you have visibility? To check this, you get down to table height and see if you can draw an imaginary line from your model's head to any part of the enemy model, including their base. In wargaming terms, we call this true line of sight, and is generally considered the worst way to decide things, but here we are, that's Games Workshop. A model first company, lol, lamau even. This is a system that punishes cool conversion and creativity from hobbyists. Anyway, can you see the enemy model? If yes, then they are visible. If that visible target has an engage order, congratulations, you have a valid target and can shoot. If it has a conceal order and not in cover, it's a valid target and can shoot. Being on a vantage point makes an enemy with a conceal order behind light terrain a valid target, and so could still be shot. That is it. That right there is the entire valid target rule. Visible, within 1 inch of cover, engage or conceal order. Vantage point flips light cover. Simple. Okay, let's get specific. How do you get cover? In Kill Team, every operative has a 1 inch control range bubble around them. This tells you if they're in cover or not. If a piece of terrain is intervening between the shooter and the target and within the target's control range, then they have cover. I'm going to say the word intervening a lot, so just to be clear, intervening just means between the two operatives. The reason I'm not saying between is because the rules use the word intervening. All simple so far, cool. Valid target is sorted. Yes, we'll discuss how we work out intervening soon, don't worry. Except for two things, vantage point and seek. Seek is a weapon rule that means when selecting a valid target, the target cannot use any terrain for intervening cover. Minor note, the seek rule is actually very rare. More common is seek light, which only stops light terrain from being intervening cover. Very few things in the game are actually seek heavy. Then we have vantage points, which are very common in Kill Team. When you're on a platform that is at least 2 inches higher than your target, they can't use light terrain as intervening cover. Again, heavy terrain is not removed by vantage point, keep that in mind. Do note that with both seek and vantage point, even though they can't use that terrain as intervening cover for purposes of valid target, they still get to retain their cover save if they choose. Only the weapon rule saturate can remove that. And if you're shooting a model on conceal with intervening light cover, remember that they can retain 2 saves instead of the normal 1 cover save. Or they can retain 1 critical save and still roll their normal 2 additional dice. In general, shooting a model on conceal behind light isn't very effective, even though you can do it and they are a valid target. Okay, that is the core of selecting a valid target. So let's discuss obscurity. Again, this is nice and simple. Obscurity can only be gained from heavy terrain. So for now, forget that light terrain exists. I'm not talking about it. Remember the term intervening terrain. That's any terrain between the shooter and the target. We've also discussed that the 1-inch control range is very much a defining thing. Well, for obscurity, we are now discussing terrain outside of that 1-inch control range. Heavy terrain only, not light. If it is intervening, then you are still a valid target and so can be shot. However, there are some very harsh negatives to taking this shot. You can't retain any criticals and you have to discard one of your successful hits. Okay, that there is the basics of valid target and obscuring. With this information safely secured, let's go ahead and run the training course. For ease of understanding, I'm using 40mm based models because I just happen to have a 1-inch control range marker for objectives, which are of course 40mm. If you want to check out these objective markers or other accoutrements yourself, check out the link to Crossfire Games on Etsy and use code GlassHalfDead24 to get 5% off. I'm going to be using the Wrecker Boys Boss Knob versus the Angels of Death Sniper Marine, because of course Marines love knobs. Additionally, for ease of understanding, we are always going to be having the Marine here, the Sniper Marine, as the active operative that is performing the shoot action. Okay, for these first dozen or so slides, I'm going to be making this super easy for you, okay? So with everything that we've just said in mind, Marine is shooting, the barricade is light cover. So what does that mean? We've got one operative within 1-inch control range that is on an engage and one operative within 1-inch control range on a conceal. So allow me to explain the key to you. If the targeting cone, the targeting lines you are drawing comes out blue, that little blue, that means it's a valid target. If it's red, that means it's not a valid target. And the yellow highlighted terrain is what is deciding that for us, okay? So as already discussed, valid target if you're on an engage order within 1. Cool. Okay, let's check out the next riddle. So this is really kind of the only thing that's going to change here, but we do get some interesting points. So our Marine is on a vantage point now, keep that in mind. We have the same set out on the left, the 2 same operatives, one on an engage, one on a conceal. On the right hand side, we then have heavy terrain. Now, how does heavy terrain interact with vantage point? I did mention it. We have one on an engage order, and then we have one on a conceal order. Give yourself a quick moment, because honestly, if you can figure this out, you basically understand line of sight. Okay, let's take a look. Boom. So, vantage point, as discussed, means that anything that is behind light terrain becomes a valid target. If we were to shoot that striking Scorpion X-Arch there, which is on the left-hand side, don't forget that it is on a conceal behind light, and so it would be able to either retain one of its dice to get a critical save and then roll its 2 other dice as normal, or it could do 2 normal saves and roll its 1 other dice as normal. Then moving over to the right side, of course, we have the heavy terrain. So we're on a vantage point, and vantage point doesn't change how heavy terrain works at all. It only changes how light terrain works. So the model on an engage order, of course, can be shot, just as it could be if we were stood on the ground. No difference to being on a vantage point there. However, we cannot shoot the model on a conceal order because it's behind heavy terrain and vantage point does not interact with heavy terrain. Honestly, you figured it out. However, let's talk about drawing targeting lines, because this is the fundamental bit. This is the core. For almost everything, you can do this. You can just look at your models and you can say, oh yeah, well that piece of terrain is clearly in between these two models, right? Let's talk about when it's an edge case scenario. Let's discuss targeting lines. So as you can see from these, you are drawing from one part of your base to the whole of the enemy base. So if we were to draw it here, again, we're drawing from the marine. It doesn't matter what order this model is on. This is just an example of drawing a targeting line, okay? So we can draw a targeting line from one single point on our base. Now, for everything else, I have drawn, just for ease of your understanding, I have drawn from the closest part, the center of my base, to the whole of the enemy base. The reason I've done this, again, purely to not confuse you. But that's not actually how we do things. It can be. If it works, that's great. However, as you can see here, if we were to take this shot, we would be granting our opponent obscured because we are drawing our cover line through a piece of heavy terrain. Now, I would like to quickly point out we are only discussing covering lines here because technically we could still take this shot as discussed. This is a obscured shot, but it's still a valid target. We would simply not be able to retain a crit, and we would have to discard one of our successful normals. Only talking about targeting lines here. So keep in mind, to draw a targeting line, we pick a single spot on our base. No, you've picked the wrong side. Luckily, it can be any single spot on our base. So this would still be an obscuring shot. Instead, we would draw it from here. You can always pick the person making the shot gets to choose where you're drawing the cover line from. And so because we are almost always actually in reality drawing it from one side of our base so that we get the best angle, we can draw it from this underside of the base, goes all to the whole of the enemy base without going through the obscuring. Except we are measuring and playing a game that takes place in a 3D space. This is a vantage point. So we're learning two things here. We're learning how to draw a targeting line in 3D space, but we're also learning simply the fact that a vantage point is light terrain. So drawing it from the marine, okay, we're shooting up to the guy up there who is on a vantage point, and vantage point is light terrain. So what does that mean for our targeting lines? It means that we go back to, very simply, shooting against light terrain. If this model up on the vantage point is on a conceal order, we cannot shoot it. But if it's on an engage order, we can shoot it. There you go, very simple. Okay everybody, I'm taking the training wheels off. We are no longer getting our nice little funky cones. We are going straight to the hardcore, and I'm going to give you some interesting curveballs in this, alright? Okay, you will see that both of these models have their 1-inch control range shown. This is so that we can play around a little bit more specifically with where their terrain is. They are both stood in front of light terrain. That light terrain is within their control range, and the knob is on a conceal order. This is nice and easy. We've already talked about this multiple times. We do not have a valid target. Easy. Okay, let's move along. Oh, he's swapped to an engage order. This means he is a valid target. You're with me, okay. Valid target, not valid target. Simple. Alright. Oh, what's happened? Okay. So, we've moved the light terrain so that our knob is no longer within control range, but he is on a conceal. What does this mean? This means he is a valid target. He would be obscured if that was heavy terrain, but he would still be a valid target either way. But yeah, there you go. If you're not within control range of any terrain, it's very easy to just say, yes, that's a valid target, and the order doesn't matter. Okay, let's go to the next one. We've got some things going on here, haven't we? So our orc is now behind heavy terrain and on a conceal. What do we think's going on here? So we've talked about this. So if what I've told you so far, if I've steered you right, that means the knob is not a valid target. But there's actually, I've tricked you. The marine is by a piece of heavy terrain as well. Let's take another angle. So the marine actually can't see the orc here. It's not shown particularly brilliantly here because, of course, it looks like you can actually see that huge yellow fist in the background, but you can't. There you go. So that, yeah, you just don't have visibility. All right, let's mix it up. Okay, so we now have our knob stood back, not within control range of anything. So you might think we can shoot. No, still don't have visibility. So it doesn't matter. Don't forget, you always check visibility for valid target. You don't just jump straight to what's the order, what's the control range of terrain. Visibility always comes first. And let me tell you this, you will find yourself, as we all have, figuring out, oh, do I have line of sight on that model? I think I've got the angle. It's on the right. Oh, I can't see it. So trust me, that will happen a lot. Same thing, doesn't matter. Just quickly going back to this, let's imagine that we could see this this knob. Just so you're aware, doesn't matter if you're on a conceal or an engage order, you're obscured. There you go. Obscured is obscured, doesn't matter the order. Cool. Okay, let's put ourselves on a vantage point. The knob there is on a conceal within 1 inch of the light terrain. What does that mean for us? That means we are able to take the shot. It is a valid target because it's light terrain, not heavy. But of course, it is within 1 inch and on a conceal. And that means they will be able to retain extra cover save bonuses, as already discussed. It now goes to an engage. That's great. We could take a shot and it will not be able to retain extra save bonuses. Good stuff. Okay. Heavy terrain, our nemesis. How does heavy terrain interact with vantage point? We're on a conceal. Can we shoot through it like we could with the light? No, we cannot. That means not a valid target. Boom, he flips to engage. We can shoot. No extra cover saves, not obscured, because he's within 1 inch of that heavy. Cool. No, hold on. What's happening here? So we're on an engage. We're not within 1 inch of the heavy terrain, but that means we are now obscured. Okay, so how does this interact? Let's do it again. Obscurity doesn't care about your order. Vantage point does not change obscurity. That means that if our Marine shoots this knob, the only thing we care about is it's a valid target. So yes, valid target, yes. If we shoot, all of your crits become normal successes. And then additionally, you discard one of your normal successes. So there you go. And this is just a 3D picture to show you that the cover line would be drawn through that piece of heavy terrain, because again, don't forget that you are drawing your cover lines in 3D space. You're not just always doing a top-down view, you do draw it diagonally as shown in one of our first trainer wheels pictures. Okay, so we've got something a little bit different here. We've got our knob on a conceal order within 1 inch of terrain, and then we've got our Marine stood on a vantage point, so we know what that means. That means that the knob is going to be a valid target. Cool. However, as I'm sure you're with me on this, our Marine is not within control range. He's not within his 1 inch of the heavy terrain that he is on. If this was on a flat surface, that would mean the knob is obscured, because we are not within control range to negate. Basically, you can shoot out of your control range as if the terrain isn't there, but we're not within 1 inch of that control range of the heavy. So would that mean that the knob is actually obscured? It would if we were on the floor, but actually what it does mean is that vantage point have a rule where you can never be obscured by heavy terrain that is connected to your vantage point. And it goes both ways. So if the knob was shooting us, likewise we are not obscured, and it's not obscured to us. So there you go, we can shoot. Lovely jubbly. Now the knob has joined us up on this vantage point. So the battlements for the knob are light terrain. The battlements for the Marine are heavy terrain. The knob is on a conceal. Do we have valid target? As discussed, vantage point makes light terrain shootable. However, the definition of a vantage point requires you to be 2 inches higher than your opponent for it to have that effect. If we look at the levels, the knob is actually a little bit higher. We don't have a shot. not a valid target. There you go. Easy stuff. Now here's a fun one. The knob's on a conceal. Could be on an engage, doesn't change how this works. Knob's on a conceal. Do we have a valid target here? What do you think? Well, it's a little bit of a tricky one. Drawing such acute cover lines is a bit odd, but almost always in this situation, you're gonna have to check visibility, and you don't got it. Let me tell you this, very, very rarely, if you're in this sort of situation, will you have any visibility to the enemy. And these are two really big models. This is like the best possible line of sights you could get, and we don't have visibility. Okay, you see that's here you go. Yeah, so let's hammer down on this. Let's drill down. Let's drill it hard. Visibility is drawn from the active operative's head. The person performing the shoot action draws a line from their head to any part of the enemy body, or sorry, any part of the enemy model. The fact that the tip of our gun can see any part of the enemy model doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. It matters about our model's head. Cool. Okay, we've changed it up a little bit now. So, knob back on the vantage point on a conceal behind, as discussed, battlements which are light terrain. Marine is now on the second floor behind that heavy cover. As discussed in the last one, if we were the same level, we wouldn't be able to have a valid target, but because we are now back on a vantage point that is 2 inches or more above the enemy, that means it's an active vantage point again, and we can shoot and have a valid target because we are 2 inches higher than the enemy. This is just a 3D picture to show you, because this one looked awfully flat, but there you go. So we're much higher. Doesn't matter the fact that the knob is on a vantage point, we are on a vantage point to him, so it's fine. But things have changed now. Things have changed a little bit. So we still have vantage point to the enemy model. Enemy model's on a conceal, and it's now behind heavy terrain. Does this change anything? No, it does not. As discussed, vantage point never negates heavy. The knob is safe again. To bring it back here, the battlements specifically on these ruins are light. The battlements on the strongholds are heavy. That's the difference. There you go, just showing you another angle so you can see what's going on. Okay, now we've got to do a little bit of practice with the Marine shooting up onto vantage. So we have our knob on a conceal. We've kind of already covered this, haven't we? The knob's on a conceal, vantage point is light, so we don't have a valid target. But he's flipped to engage. Do we have a valid target? Yes, we do. So we can shoot up to a vantage point when the enemy's on an engage. Let's try it again. So we've removed this wall from the equation. We're just shooting a ruin. Does this change anything? We're shooting up to a vantage point. There's no wall in the way, but that doesn't matter because it's all about the actual floor of the vantage point. Knobs on a conceal, not a valid target. Knobs on an engage, valid target. There you go. The actual wall that can be in front of you on a stronghold or on any ruin is irrelevant. There you go. Cool. Well, now we have some interesting things going on. So let's think about this. Our Marine is on the floor. He's shooting up to a vantage point with the enemy on a engage. Is this a valid target? The answer is yes, we know that. However, we are shooting through the stronghold wall. The stronghold wall, as we see there, is heavy. So is the knob obscured? Normally, the answer here would be yes. And if that stronghold wall wasn't a stronghold wall and it was just a random piece of ruin, then it would be yes, valid target but obscured. However, because that stronghold wall is connected to the vantage point that the knob is on, it's not counting as obscured in either direction. Doesn't matter who's shooting who. If you are shooting through heavy, connected to the vantage point you're on, not obscured. Okay, let's try this again. So we've got our 1 inch control range radius circles back. Lovely. We're shooting through this heavy terrain. What does that do for us? We were talking about how if you're on the vantage point of it, perhaps that means you're not obscured, but neither of these models have anything to do with the stronghold. The stronghold is simply there. That means this would be an obscured shot. Again though, the fact that we are on a conceal with the knob doesn't mean anything, because we're not within control range of any terrain. This is an obscured shot, but still a valid target. Ah, well, things have changed for us, haven't they? The situation is different. So we now have an engage order, and we are within 1 inch, drawing our targeting lines to the knob. So this is, again, nice and easy. It's heavy terrain, the enemy is on an engage, that's a valid target, but obscured. Now, a little kind of note here, we're going to go further into this one, because the enemy is both obscured and has a cover save. This is the worst possible scenario for us. So what this means is in this scenario, the knob will be able to retain a cover save if they wish. They get to decide whether or not to do that, and it's obscured, so not only are they retaining a cover save, we cannot get any crits, and we have to discard one of our successes. Now I've removed the stronghold aspect from this just to make sure we're all clear on it, and this is something that's going to come up a lot. Ignore this corner. We can get a cover save and obscured from this piece of terrain here. As soon as our targeting line touches heavy terrain, any heavy terrain along that targeting line, along that targeting cone, you then immediately start counting 1 inch. 1 inch from this barely makes it to that center crease of that board, as you can see. The knob is well and truly obscured and gaining cover from the same piece of heavy terrain. Now, this is a poorly taken picture, but let me tell you what's happening. Marine shooting the knob on an engage. Heavy terrain between them. And let me tell you this, okay? Have a think before I give you the answer immediately. The heavy terrain is within our 1 inch control range, but as you can see, only just, and the control range doesn't extend to the other side. What does this mean? Because of Vulcus, because of the way the game works, because of obscurity and cover lines, and targeting lines, and cover and orders and engages, this is going to be a thing that happens relatively often for you, okay? This is part of why I always say in my other videos that Vulcus is dominated by melee. Because this knob right now is getting a cover save and obscurity from this piece of heavy terrain. And he's on an engage, so he can shoot freely. This is an issue. As long as you are within control range of a piece of heavy terrain, you get a cover save. And as long as that control range doesn't extend out the other side of that heavy terrain, you get obscurity. I'm not saying this is a good thing to do. I'm just pointing out that as the rules are written, and the fact that you can get both obscured and a cover save from the same piece of terrain, this can be done. Is it possible that in the future it might be FAQ'd so that you have to elect whether you're getting obscured or a cover save? Probably, but we shall see. So this is a little aside note. This isn't about valid target. This is about control range. One of the first things control range requires is visibility, okay? And I'm pointing this out just because it's going to come up. These two models are within 1 inch control range of each other. However, there is heavy terrain between them. And let's take a look. This Mandrake and the Arbites dude do not have visibility to each other, okay? However, the piece of terrain that they are stood between them is a stronghold wall that is under 2 inches high. And there is a special rule on Vulcus where when it comes to control range specifically, not valid target, not line of sight, I'm just talking about control range. When it comes to visibility, you do not count either the doors or any piece of wall under 2 inches in height. So although these two models do not have visibility, and so technically would not be in each other's control range, for example to melee, because of a stronghold rule, you can actually make this fight, and they are in each other's control range. If we go ahead and look at this piece of heavy terrain between them now, again, they are not visible, but they are within 1 inch of each other, but it doesn't matter because that was only for the stronghold that ignored that. Right now, they don't have visibility, so they are not in each other's control range. They're not a valid target, anything like that. Okay, we've got one final test. We've got our Marine Sniper about to shoot our knob. Okay, we've got our 1 inch control ranges out. What do you think? Do we have a valid target, yay or nay? So for this one particularly, I'm going to show you how you will work this sort of challenge out in a real game, and that's using something called a laser line. I have one from Army Painter. If you just search Army Painter laser line, this will come up. If you end up drawing this targeting line from the wrong side of the base, which of course we would never do, but just as an illustration, because we are outside of the control range of that piece of heavy terrain, we would have a valid target, but the knob would be obscured, so instead we will draw it from the correct side of the Marine's base. This is the effect that the targeting laser gives you when you use it. Good luck holding it still, but it does work for you, don't worry. So we draw our targeting line from the correct side of the Marine's base, and then we have not just a valid target, but also an unobscured valid target. Okay, well, blimey, hey, if you've made it to the end of the video and you are someone that watched this because you genuinely did not understand valid target and obscurity and all such things, that's been a huge overload of information. I hope that, you know, hey, if you have to watch this video multiple times, you do you. There's a lot there. I'm lucky because I've internalized it over the last 3 years, but learning this for the first time, so many people had struggles with it. It's great that Kill Team has improved its verbiage, its language, but it still is the same actual line of sight system as the last edition. So it is a little bit complicated, but I promise you it is a really cool part of Kill Team that really defines the game. And if you've just been watching along to have fun, trying to figure out if you can guess valid target or not, obscured or not, before I actually give the answer away, I hope you've enjoyed that as well. Anyway, thank you for watching the end of the video, everybody. Stay cool. Thank you. Bye.